Good evening and welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Reverend Dr. Vanessa M. Brown and I'm your host for the evening. I'm excited to be here and glad that you are here with us on tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about Black Girls Matter, Girlhood Interrupted. That's Black Girls Matter, Girlhood Interrupted. And I want to thank our Facebook Live audience who I see gathering. I want to thank our YouTube audience. I want to thank our Twitter audience that's with us on tonight. And I want to bring to us our guest for the evening. Before we get started into conversation, we ask that you share, so that we can have this very, very important conversation tonight. Our first guest is Dr. Lewis C. Knox. He is the Director of Client Relations and also a part of the Blacksburg law firm. Please, Dr. Lewis C. Knox, open up your mic and tell the people about what you are working on.
Greetings, salutations. I'm Lewis Knox. I am with the Blacksburg law firm. I serve as the Director of Client Relations. We are an estate planning law firm in the Bay Area, and we have been in activities for over 20 years, and we are grateful for all the support that the community has given us as we try to put together estate plans for those folks who are in need. In addition to that, I am the deacon and facility manager at City of Refuge, where I have charge to manage a 36,000 square foot facility and to be available to our clients who are tenants of the building, community leaders, and those folks who are looking to lease our property for events. I have the great pleasure to support Bishop Flunder in that effort and to support our larger community as we try to make sure that people of color have estate plans and that women and girls are taken care of. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Appreciate it and glad to see you once again. And we have another guest, and she's actually been here with us before, actually on several occasions, and we are excited to have her here in the person of Reverend Dr. Shakeema North, who is the Vice President of Youth Development, Equity, and Inclusion at Covenant House here in New York City. Reverend Dr. Shack, as I like to call her, and so does people that really know her can call her Dr. Shack. Please come and greet the people.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Brown, for having me tonight to be in conversation with you all. As Dr. Vanessa already said, I am Shakeema North. My friends call me Shaq, so everybody out there, you can call me Shaq too, because we are a community of friends. I serve as the Vice President of Youth Development, Equity, and Inclusion at Covenant House, New York, which is which provides housing and support services for young people experiencing homelessness for a number of reasons, including abandonment, trafficking, abuse, neglect. Some of our young people have run away, so we provide support and housing services for those young people in New York City. The other thing that I'm working on at this moment, in addition to making sure our agency is doing what we need to do to serve the needs of youth experiencing homelessness, is I am working now to turn my thesis project, which centered on strength-based youth development and trauma-informed care for church-connected youth, into a book. So y'all pray for me in that project.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Shack. We appreciate you. Last but certainly not least, not a guest, in the person of Bishop Yvette A. Flunder. She is the presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and also the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California. Bishop Flunder, will you come and greet the people and also lay the foundation for tonight's conversation?
Well, good evening, everyone. It is a great joy to be in the company of these brilliant minds and folks who we call family in the struggle for our young people, and particularly tonight for our young girls, for young women. I'm very pleased. Bishop Pearson sends his regards. He is out of town and also obligated to some other things tonight, but this is a subject that he and I have wrestled with for quite some time. Again, because one of the greatest assets to the lives of young women is also in many ways one of the greatest detriments to the lives of young women. And that is a poor theology about the value of young women in church and society, and the diminishment of young women, and the concept that women are basically for service and being baby making machines, and a whole lot of realities that exist for young women in and around religion. The struggle with being a young Black woman is a struggle of a two-edged sword, being diminished as woman, being diminished as woman of African descent simultaneously is a difficult stream to ferret. There's no question about that. For young, I happen to know because I was once a young Black woman. The scripture says I once was young, but now I'm old. But the truth of the matter is I have seen these situations and circumstances as close as one possibly can. And it trickles down into our society. The role of women in church, the ways in which young women are sexualized prematurely and made to feel that it is their fault, the way that they are expected to be strong and to learn to suffer as though there is some salvific value or some inherent strength that women are supposed to have to be able to endure difficult, almost impossible situations and to feel diminished when they can't. I remember, if I can just mention, I was at a barbershop that Lewis and I was across the street from our barbershop over on MacArthur. And our guy was not there. So I went across the street to another one. The young man was cutting my hair. He couldn't have been more than about 35 years old. He couldn't have been. And he was grumbling and complaining and grumbling and complaining. And I said, well, brother, what is the location of your sorrow? What is wrong with you? And he said, it's the baby mamas. I said, so tell me about that. Mamas, plural. The baby mamas, that's what he said to me. I said, so tell me what that means. He said, I got 5 children. I said, you got 5 children? He said, yes, I got 5 children and 3 mamas. I said, okay, keep talking to me. He said, and all of them want something. Diapers here, rent here, food here. And he was grumbling and complaining. They said, now they want the child support. They want to take me to court, some child support. So I said to him, I said, so brother, how exactly did you expect that these women were going to take care of these children when you were making them? Well, I get by there sometime, I drop off some diapers, and I get by there sometime. And I said, so the full responsibility, sans the diapers, falls to these women who have these children. Did you think about that at all? And I said this to him, and then I'm going to stop. I said, you can have a vasectomy. I'm going to stop right there. I am so glad to see all of you all. And I am so glad for the opportunity that we have to talk about making a way for young women to have a different world. First inside of themselves and their own minds and their own thoughts. And then moving and raising society to a place where we honor, engage, support, educate, affirm young Black women. To those of you who are listening, it's your day and it's your time. God bless you.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. So I want to start off with the statement. I did not write it. The statement is by Reverend Tracy Blackman. And here it goes. There is a disturbing trend in this country as it pertains to the taking of Black lives by police, and it must end. It is as pervasive among Black people as it is among others. When a Black person is killed by police, the deceased is immediately tried by public opinion, as the question is not, why did this person have to die? The question is, why should this person live? Immediately, the person's life, actions, context are examined to decide whether their death is a loss to society. Did Sandra Bland talk back and therefore deserve to die? Was Tamir Rice holding a toy gun while he sat in a swing and therefore deserved to die? Did Michael Brown have an altercation in a convenience store earlier that day and therefore deserved to die? Was George Floyd high and therefore deserved to die? Was Eric Garner selling CDs without a permit and therefore deserved to die? Did Kajami Powell have a knife in his hand from a distance too far away to use it and therefore deserve to die? Did Breonna Taylor not wake up fast enough and therefore deserve to die? Did Von Derek Myers look suspicious and therefore deserve to die? Did Dante Wright question his stop and therefore deserve to die? Was Ma'Khia Bryant fighting with a knife and therefore she deserved to die? There is no other race of people in this country that must prove they deserve to live before we mourn their death. Just stop it. Yes, killings must be thoroughly investigated, but can we just begin with this foundational principle? Black lives matter. Whether they are perfect lives or not, whether we agree with them or not, whether they look respectable or not, whether they are docile or not, whether they are who you want them to be or not, Black lives matter. Can we just begin there? Can we just begin with all Black people deserve to live? And tonight we are here to talk about Black Girls Matter, Girlhood Interrupted, specifically around the life of 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant, who was laid to rest on last week. Many of us already know the story. I don't want to spend a lot of time rehearsing it. If you don't know the story, I want you to be able to go and read about some of the things that happened in the course of that day. I believe the day was April 20th. It was the same day that we were receiving the verdict in the George Floyd and the Derek Chauvin trial. And so I want to begin with this question to the panel. And the first question is, why or in what ways are Black girls adultified? And I want to start with Dr. Shack.
Yeah, first of all, I think the statement that you read, who was it by Pastor Blackman? Pastor Blackman was very profound, because we always have a tendency to want to make excuses for, right, and qualify the reasons why the lives of Black people, and in this particular case for tonight, young Black women are taken by the police. But there is no excuse, right, for the excessive use of force that we have been seeing projected against our people by police. In terms of, just the adultification of Black girls, I think that, some of it has stemmed since slavery, right? And so it's something that has been a part of or embedded within our society as it pertains to Black women, where, Black girls were put to work like early on, right, in their childhood. And I think it's also around the stereotypes of Black women that we project on Black girls, right? So they're loud, right? They're aggressive. They're, in hip hop vernacular, they're chicken heads, right? They're disrespectful and rude. And so when for example, a white girl, right, is asserting herself, right, and speaking loudly, she's seen to be assertive. Where if a Black girl would do the same thing, she's seen to be loud and aggressive. Or if a white child would be setting boundaries, right? Because in most cases, white children learn to set boundaries early on, right? And they're applauded for learning how to set boundaries for themselves, right? It's seen as a positive thing, right? But when we teach Black girls to set boundaries, it's seen as something negative, right? They're challenging authority. They're being threatening. They're being rude and disrespectful. So this adultification of our Black girls has caused a lot of us, and not just white people, because Black adults, adultify Black girls as well, right? And it is a form of abuse that we have projected against our Black girls.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shack. Dr. Lewis, what say you?
Thank you, Dr. Shack. I agree with almost everything that you said. You know, when I was thinking about what you were saying, it occurred to me that we as African American and men participate in this as well. The other day, I decided to listen to the top 100 music in America put out by Apple. And I thought, because I usually listen to gospel, I thought, let me listen to some hip hop and trying to get to know the players. And about 3 songs into it, I just said, I can't. The bitches, the hoes, the denigration of our women, the talking about women under their dress. I mean, it was just so profound. And I thought to myself, well, we often, you know, it goes back to Bishop Flunder's point about Black folks killing Black folks. We spend a lot of time talking about what the white folks and the police are doing to ourselves, but we often don't look at what we are doing to ourselves. And although not all rap music and hip hop music denigrate women, much of it does. And if we're talking about changing the perspective of how we see our Black women and Black girls, we have to talk about how we in our culture as men, do the same thing. As it relates to the police, you know, with this young girl, this 16-year-old girl, I think about how is it that when white folks are stopped by the police or even carrying a gun, they often, almost always, come out alive. It just amazes me, but it doesn't amaze me because, as we talked about in one of the previous programs, is that we can't expect a system that wasn't created to support us and to help us or to save us actually do any of those things. Much of the law, as much of the policing that we see in our society, is based on the fact that the police departments were never set up to support Black people. We're never set up to support Latinos. We're never supported to support our women. You know, I look at some of the videos. I saw an African-American woman was 80, a 65-year-old. I think that they grabbed her and put her head down in the ground, you know, and then you saw the tape at the police station. How about they talk about, I grabbed a bunch of those braids. And you know, it's systemic. It's systemic in our society. It begins at home. And the first question I have is, what are we as Black people, as Black men, going to do to answer, to support our Black women? We talked earlier, Dr. Vanessa, about the foster home care system and how the foster home care system literally destroys our people. It destroys Black women. I have the example of, you know, I grew up, as some of you know, in foster care. And I think about my sister who went into foster care with me. And by the time she was 10, had been sexually abused by several people inside the foster home and out. She started sleeping with a hammer to attack the people who were attacking her. She ended up being penalized for attacking her attackers, and it destroyed her life. I was fortunate enough to go to a foster home that had been created as an experiment for same gender loving kids or for kids who had been molested. And I had been both. And so I was placed in that foster home. She wasn't as fortunate and went from pillar to post. And by the time she was 18, she was strung out on drugs. She continued to use and ended up dying at a very early age. That is because the system that we were put in when I was 3 years old never supported her any along the way and any time in that process. And so we have to look at these systems that created the foster care system, the police system, the criminal justice system, and ask the questions: what is the system doing to help us or to harm us? And what do we do to make systemic change?
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Bishop Flunder, the adultification of girls.
Well, I have to say that there are things that we hold on to from the cultures of our past. And I'm talking about humankind, if you understand what I mean. The roles of women. We can't attest to every society. Some predate our ability even to know. But I do know a lot about the society in Africa and the society in the United States. And then the biblical and church related, and the reason I keep bringing it up is because most families of color are also families of faith and have a background in faith and have been to some degree colonized by faith. And I don't say that carelessly, because I am a person of faith personally and a leader in faith and faith-based organizations and denominations and pursuits, essentially. But I do feel it's important to lift the veil on this in terms of how what it is that Dr. Knox just lifted up was also exercised often in the places where we were, and in the name of God and good. And for instance, the adultification of girls. I remember there were two ways to dress. You were a little girl, and then you had grown folks' clothes on. Let me do it again. You were a little girl, you wore little girl clothes, and then you went from that to wearing clothes that were much older for you and sometimes cut down to fit. It's as though when I was a girl coming along, there was nothing in the middle. There was nothing called teenage. There was nothing where you were going to be able to be in any way risque. And I think you may understand what I'm saying. There would be no jiggling. They told us that we had to put girdles on. I've told you all before that they gave me my first one, and I wasn't quite 10 years old. But because I had the propensity to jiggle, that I should jiggle not. So they put a jiggle-free device on me to make sure that it wouldn't happen. I went from being a child to being a young woman without anything in the middle, because that in the middle was not permitted in those environments. Now, there are not all families of faith that think that way, but that reality does in many ways permeate, in many ways, our society. And the time that in a young woman's life that she most needs help and assistance is moving from being a child to being a young adult. But she's got to have that experience. She should not have to go from being a child to being a grown woman who is pushing back against people who want to sexualize her, who is being told that her duty in life is to make really good hot water cornbread. And she has never had an opportunity to choose lipstick colors. Come on now. Whether or not she wanted her hair to be red or green. She's never had a chance to be a young adult. Now, it's very different for boys. If we're going to talk the binary, there's something else that boys are taught. Often in environments like this, they don't go from being little boys to being men. They go from being little boys to being free. And then they're supposed to learn how to be free. And then at some point, wheel it in. Right? But that space did not exist in many families when I was coming along for girls. Girls are responsible. If something happens with a boy, it is your fault. You should not have been in that place. You should not have allowed that. You should not have permitted it. If he took you, it's because you were not fighting hard enough. Something was always wrong. And that's why you have to be held down and tied down, because these things can happen to you. Pregnancy and servitude. They walked hand in hand, one and the other. Either the pregnancy or the potential for pregnancy and the call of the divine for your servitude. If you don't think that you're supposed to be a servant, then you're not reading the text properly. How did that spill over into the behaviors of some of our girls? Because a lot of our girls are not prepared for the world. Not everybody has a Dr. Shack. They're not prepared for the world. They're not prepared for the world. And when I say not prepared, not only not prepared essentially because the education is less and it's less sought after still in many, many places because they're diminished theologically, but they're not prepared for the world. There's an aura. When you meet a woman, a young woman who has been taught self-confidence, self-love, and self-esteem, there's an aroma that comes off of her that says to perhaps the person who would perpetrate something in her life, it says to them, I'm not the one. I'm telling you straight out, if you're going to come for somebody, you're going to have to come for somebody else. I'm not the one. I may lose the fight, but I promise you, when they see you, they're going to know you've been in one. There's something that comes out when a young woman is taught to be confident and self-loving and powerful, and when her expanse of her ability happens in her life. I know. And again, I know the people I'm looking at right now know and teach this and help. Question is, how do we broaden our reach so that they're not growing up just on what people are saying to them online, so that they're not growing up somehow with it in their mind that if I could be a so-and-so if I were just not a woman. If I was just not a woman, I could be a so-and-so and a such and such, and my dreams that don't fit comfortably in this bag could come true. A lot of these young girls, like the one that we are talking about tonight, picked up violence as a defense. You learn to fight, you learn to cut, you learn to shoot, you learn to go off on people, you learn to, who you looking at? You learn to cuss, you learn to, you just learn because you are trying to fight your own internal sense of victimhood. We've got to do something about it. We got to love our girls as much as we love our boys. We have to want them to have a great and beautiful future and a powerful future. We want them to make money, get education, start businesses. And for us to stop acting like all she needs to do is marry a man that makes money and gets a business. Then she can never have the opportunity to say to that person, I'm out of here. This today is the last day that you're going to mistreat me. This is the last, and stop telling me how am I going to eat if I leave you. I got a plan. I got it hooked up, and I just wanted to let you know I'm out. That's a very powerful place that very few women who are living in abuse can actually have. It's a very important thing to say. So you flicked my big when you asked me that.
Dr. Shack, you have a response?
I had so many things running in my mind as Bishop was talking, but in terms of the contribution that I think the church has made to the adultification of girls, I think that we have, with our girls, created perfect victims who learn at a very young age how to be a perfect victim of Stockholm syndrome, right? And so that's some of, Bishop, what you were just talking, that came to my mind. It's like we're teaching young girls to be connected to their abuser, right? And not how to, giving them the tools to disconnect in abusive situations, right? For many Black girls, the church is where they were first body shamed, right? As we were developing, we were automatically considered to be promiscuous. We didn't even know what that was, right? It's just our body is just developing naturally, but then this prescriptive behavior was put upon us, right? And so we didn't necessarily learn about positive body image or healthy relationships because the church itself was itself carrying out this adultification of girls. And I think it's unfortunate because what it does is it creates perfect victims, right? So when we talk about what does a perfect victim look like, in some instances, you could say that there's no such thing as that, right? But part of what we're doing in not teaching girls how to survive, right, positively, then we're creating perfect victims. And then when they get older, we wonder why, there's, the impact of what in my agency, what we know as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, right? Which leads to health disparities in adults. So we wonder why there's the drinking, right? We wonder why there's alcoholism. We wonder why there is risky sexual behavior, right? Because we didn't do right by our girls when they were girls.
I wanted to add to Dr. Shack. I was thinking about, you're talking about women in the church. One of the things that also happens with girls and women in the church is that they learn to take leadership, but stand behind a man. So often it's the women who are actually running the institution, but it's the men who are taking the credit. So women learn at a very young age to stay in their place, right? To lead, but never get ahead of me. So as we're talking about what has to happen for women, there's a lot of re-education that needs to happen for men as well as it relates to women and girls in the church and outside the church.
Thank you both, Shaq and Lewis, Dr. Lewis. I want to say, particularly when we talk about young girls and we talk about abuse, that abuse is not always physical abuse. A lot of times that abuse is emotional and mental abuse, which is more difficult to move past than even the physical abuse, right? And so then you become tethered to whoever the abuser is, which continues to put you into a cycle of toxicity, right, in your relationships. And I don't care what kind of relationships they are. They could be relationships with your parents, your mama, your guardian, your grandmother, or the person that your significant other. It leads to a world of toxicity. Makia Bryant was 16 years old. She was not an adult. She was 16. She was still a kid. She was a teenager. And Bishop Flunder said something that is accurate. Learn violence. Well, yeah, she had to learn to protect herself because in actuality, in that particular situation, 2 adult women came by to fight her. And she felt a need to protect herself. Now, maybe egged on by her father or whoever, but she felt a need to protect herself and she got a knife so that she could do that. And so I want to talk about what Dr. Lewis brought up in the very beginning about the foster care system, right? So who do we hold responsible for Makia Bryant's death? Is it the police officer? Is it the foster care system? Is it her parents? Is it all 3? Right? I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about this very poignant question. Should the foster care system be abolished or should it be reformed? And I'll start with Lewis Knox, Dr. Lewis Knox.
Thank you. One of the biggest misnomers that we've all heard in our lives is that words, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is the biggest misnomer that I've ever heard. The fact is, words do destroy us, and those words often come right in our foster care settings. In my own experience, I had a foster mother that told me for 8 years that I came from nothing and that I'd always be nothing. I went to her at 5 years old. I left there at 15. And I must tell you that there are things I do today, if I can be completely transparent, that I lack confidence in doing. Because that voice that says you came from nothing and will always be nothing is still there. Foster care, I mentioned, definitely needs to be revamped. It needs to be cultural competent. It needs to have folks who really want to be parents, not who just want money. And people who actually care about the health and welfare of the charge. My experience is that same foster mother who's told me that I came from nothing and would always be nothing also told me she hated me. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. She told me, I hate you. I do not like you. I watched my sister become completely.
Wait, Louis, but
destroyed.
why did she take you? Why would you take a child? And I'm getting upset.
Money. It was
I
money.
understand that. But
It
this
was
is
money.
what you're going to do to a child?
It
That
was
you
money.
hate them over
Yeah.
money? You want to check so bad that you're going to take a child into your care,
Absolutely.
and you're not
Absolutely.
really caring for them, because you can do a whole lot for me, but if you abuse me emotionally and mentally, I will never. Okay, I'm gonna let you finish.
And my experience is that many foster care children experience these things. I was by no means an exception. And believe it or not, the fact that I made it through, I consider myself lucky. I'm bruised, but I made it through. Many don't. I've gone to many funerals of foster care children in my foster parents' charge who were killed or died while in their care. I used my sister. I want to speak her name, Rebecca Moss. Rebecca died at 49. At 49, she died after years of crack, after years. And I remember saying to our birth mother, I really hope she has a few years of peace in this life before she dies. And I think she died 2 years later. The foster care system right now, because Black and brown kids are very plentiful, they are just warehoused into foster care homes of people who don't care about them, but care for the mighty dollar. And the most tragic thing is that many of these kids and young girls, when they reach the age of majority, when they reach 18, they are told, you're gone. You have to leave here. They don't care if you don't have a home. They don't care if you haven't made provisions for college. They don't care. The money has stopped and you have to go. That is an absolute horrendous situation. And the fact that they're brown and Black kids, it's sort of like what happens to our criminal justice system. We pack them up in jails and turn the page. Nobody cares, no one's concerned, and no one is listening to the pleas.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Bishop Flunder.
Oh, I used to direct a specialized foster care home, myself and one of my older cousins. And I just want to say amen in terms of the system. I think it's just important that I say that. And our youngest baby was 2 years old. And then we had some other ones that were very close to me in age. They had just not reached the age of majority. And I have to say that most all of them came with the situations that all of you are lifting up. The baby girl was the child of a woman prostitute and her Black pimp. And she was stunningly beautiful. A beautiful little baby, and she grew up with us, and she learned the ways of the Pentecostal church. She could clap on the 2 and the 4 and sing songs, and she stayed with me until she was about 3 or 4, and they found her grandmother, the mother of the mother, and her grandmother came to get her. And when she drove off, it took me about 2 weeks to get straightened out, but I knew it was the thing that needed to happen. She needed to never go back to her mother and her father. The place that she went was so much better. The heart of what I'm saying is that everything that I have heard speaks to what would posit is a required way forward for us. Because our truth is that broken people break people. Hurt people hurt people. Destroyed people destroy people. And there are people that are asking in the chat, how do we do this as people of faith and people of heart and care and love? How do we do that? I think that Dr. Shack, Dr. Lewis, they're good examples. I think we need to not do this just from the hip. I think we need to get some real training. We need to know something about the human behaviors that happen as a result of some of the things that people have been through. And what we don't know, we need to ask for help, both for ourselves and for our community. And there's no amount of putting blessed oil on people and bringing them up to the altar and shaming them and quoting scriptures to them that is going to help them if they don't have some real tools to go out there in the world and to deal with their unrequited anger and brokenness that turns, as you said, Lewis, into substance abuse and any other kind of addiction, not just addiction to drugs, and something that essentially is going to shift and change the inside of your brain, essentially, in and around this, but addictions to affection, addictions to money, addictions to the self. Do you understand? Such that every time you see them, they change their nose, change their hair, change their shoes, change their city, change their job, because they're still seeking for a place to be that's going to help them to be who it is that they really desire to be. And everywhere they go, there they are, you know, and it continues to be. And so I think that there is something that can be done. But I think it begins with all of us taking a good look at where we're broken, because broken people break people. How you doing? How's your self-love while you're trying to teach self-love to other people? How are you doing? How are you doing? Because if you are infected with self-hatred and self-loathing, we need you, as the old folks used to say, get somewhere and sit down and see if what we can do is do some work. We all got some closets, Lewis. We all have some closets, honey. We got some closets, and we need some work done in our own closets. We have some closets, and let's get some help so that we can be of assistance in many ways to our young people. I know we need to hear from our folks.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. I just wanted to say that we have a comment from Danae Tate, and Danae is actually a member of Rivers of Living Water. Mm-hmm. And I'm always glad to see when Danae comes on. But she says, I'm so grateful for this conversation that is being had. As a former foster child from the age of 2 to 21, I always felt displaced and unworthy. I think the foster care system should be reformed. Thank you, Danae. We appreciate that. Dr. Shack.
Yeah. Amen and amen. I think when it comes to Makia Boyd, the first question you asked is about, who's to blame, right? And I think that as many have already said, that this was a number of systems, right, that failed her. I definitely think it was the foster care system, right? Because as I was learning more about what was published, right, because there's so much stuff that we don't know, right? But as I was learning about what was published, I had so many questions about what was going on in this home, what was going on in this placement, that where one of the articles said that, 11 times, right, there was an investigation at this home where a young person had ran away from the home. And so there was investigation there. There was some other instances of violence that was happening in that home that the cops had to respond to. And so the question
11
is,
times, Dr. Shaw. 11 times.
Why were kids still being placed there? Right. So definitely the foster care system, a society that is prejudiced against children also failed her, right? Because I think we live in a society that by and large does not care about children. The other system that failed her is definitely the criminal justice system, right? Dr. Lewis has already talked about that. And the tendency of the criminal justice system to employ racist people to do its bidding, right? Has also failed her. And then just the lack of support for families, because we really don't support families doing well, right, and being whole. So So I think that a number of systems have failed her. When it comes to whether or not the foster care system should be abolished or reformed, I think it's a both and, right? I think that, first of all, if once we get rid of the precipitating factors that makes agencies like foster care agencies or homeless shelters a need, then we won't have a need for them, right? But abolishment is about investment, right? And so until we're willing to invest in the well-being of children and families, until we're willing to invest in housing and economic support, we're not going to get to the point where we can talk about abolishment, right? So if people are still profiting off of these systems, then abolishment is not going to happen, right? So now we have this conversation about reform, and I think that's where we are now. We can definitely work towards abolishment, but while the system is still in place, reform has to happen to lead to abolishment, right? Potentially. And so in terms of reform, I think that better case management, right? And that definitely, I think Makia would have been alive today had there been better case management in her case. Removing bad foster parents, right, and not placing children in the homes of bad foster parents. I think talking about what family reunification looks like in the system, meaning that we give families the resources that they need to care and support the child in the way that they need to, so that both the child and the family can thrive. Better programs to stabilize the mental health, right, of our young people. I read in one of the articles that not only was Makia dealing with some mental health challenges, but also her mother was, which is why she was removed from the home in the first place, right? And then also the grandmother had Makia as well, and then she had to do a voluntary placement because, well, we don't know why, but I would assume that was something dealing with poverty, right? Because she probably couldn't afford to take care of all those kids. And so she had to release them back into the system. So there's the poverty issue around foster care as well. So I think that reform is key. And then I think, Dr. Lewis mentioned this, it's also the money aspect. We need some reform around and some controls around that too, because we do know that sometimes people sign up to be foster parents so they can get a check, right? And one of the things that in my experience at Covenant House, one of the things that we're working on from a New York State legislative agenda policy item, particularly when it comes to the child welfare system around broken adoptions, right? Because foster care kids can become adopted, and then they get subsidies for that as well. And so New York, they get a subsidy of up to about $800 to $1,900 a month. So that's up to $23,000 a year that you can get for adopting a child. There's no limit to how many kids you can adopt. So you can potentially make a living off of adopting children. And then what happens is they kick them out of the home. They still keep the subsidy, and then the kids end up living in places like Covenant House, right? There is nothing legislatively that says that is illegal, right? And so when we talk about reform, we have to also talk, like, who is benefiting from some of this stuff, right? Like, where's the money going, right? And who is benefiting? And until we can answer that question, we can't get to the abolishment piece, right? Because abolishment is about investment, and somebody is benefiting. And the last thing I will say to that, particularly about the Covenant House piece, is that about 32% of our young people who are living in the homeless shelter has histories of being in foster care, right? And so when we talk about aging out, where they're going, they're becoming homeless. So that pipeline from foster care to homelessness. Or some of them haven't aged out, and the foster care homes that they're put in are abusive. And so they're coming to homeless shelters, right? The same thing for LGBTQ youth, right? And so they're being placed in homes that are not affirming and being kicked out because their sexual orientation and gender identity and ending up homeless, right? So all of that stuff, like, you know, surveying the homes better that we're placing kids in can definitely help with reform of the foster care system.
Love that. That was excellent. Before you go, Lewis, I just want to say Bishop Flunder said something about mental health and about, you know, that hurt people, right? And that people are broken and that we need to, you know, those, you know, because you're passing on that hurt, you're passing on that trauma from, you know, from one thing that Makia Bryant's family was definitely a family of trauma. They had a lot of things going on prior to the child had been in foster care along with her sister for 3 years, right? 3 years, 3 whole years. So there was some trauma. The mother, as Dr. Shack said, was refusing mental health therapy, right? Wasn't making the visitations like she was supposed to make the visitations. There's so much that is involved with this young girl's death. Like, it's not just one thing, right? There's a myriad of difficulties that have happened in this young girl's life that she was not necessarily responsible for, that some adult was responsible for, and they could not maintain. And so hence we have the death of this young girl. I wanted to say that. I wanted to make a note of that having mental health therapy is important, right? In family environments, in environments where there is, you know, and I know Bishop Flunder has worked with young people, and I have worked with young people, Dr. Sheck, we all have worked with young people, and we know the family dynamics, right? So we know that the young people need therapy, but not just the young people that need therapy, the children that need therapy, but also the family, the parents, you know what I mean? They need the therapy too. And so one of the things I just want to put out there is that, you know, if you are intending to not adopt, but be in foster care, you know, as Bishop Flunder said, we need the training, but you need to make sure that before you go, that you get mental health therapy for some of your trigger issues that might jump off while you're taking care of this kid. All right. So I wanted to be able to say that. And I want to say to the Facebook Live audience, the YouTube audience, and the Twitter audience, thank you for listening. And if you have a question, please put question on the front end and then make sure that you say whatever your question is. Bishop Flunder?
I was just going to say that I still juxtapose this also to this ongoing conversation about a woman not having a right to choose, which is in terms of when and how she's going to have babies, because a lot of children end up being jettisoned like this because it was a bad decision to even have a child during certain times and circumstances. And then I connect that to a lot of religiosity that's associated with it. It's so grossly hypocritical to require people who are in great need of substance abuse intervention, in great need of housing, in great need of mental and emotional health support, and to tell them that they have to keep a baby. They just have to, and not have all of the things in place. See, there's no real energy about putting the things in place. They're not sending you a whole bunch of money, Dr. Shack, to help you to expand your program from county to county and state to state. They're the same people that have access to really change the laws, to really take care of kids when they age out of foster care. And you know full well that we have provided housing, you know, Lewis, to young people, LGBT kids in the inner city. And when they get to be 18, they got to go. And without a plan for what is going to happen to them, they are on the street. And there's only a few ways to make money on the street, you know? So I do think that there's a huge hypocrisy here that is requiring people who are unready to have children. And the true victims, the greater victim of that reality is the children. because they don't have the support that they need to really become who they, and we need to get away from this whole thing about have that baby and then just drop them. God wants you to have that baby, and then we just drop them as though now the mission has been accomplished. And I'll say it to you in this allegory that I had a couple that I was counseling, the man and a woman, and they had a baby together, and they were both, to your point, Louis, they were both active crack users. They had a baby, and there was a phalanx of people around them telling them, go on and have that baby, go on and have that baby. God is going to heal you, and God's going to heal the baby, and it's going to have that baby. They went on and had the baby. Neither of them were clean. And she was breastfeeding and wasn't, if you understand what I'm saying. Eventually, the baby developed incredible respiratory problems. And I was with them when the baby died. The baby was 6 months old when the baby died. They came in to me for counseling. I did the funeral, the whole deal, and they were devastated at the loss of the baby. And inside of myself, I was so angry. That's my personal response that I want to confess. I was so angry that they were actively using crack and that it had an effect on the baby physically. And the baby died. It was just horrible to me. I was there when the baby could not breathe and died. And it was a horrible experience to watch. And I was so angry, I couldn't hardly find some counseling for them. I just have to be honest. While I was talking to them, I was looking for some words and trying to get my skill together about it. But this is what I realized in that room, that there was the mother, there was the father, there was me, and then there was another presence. And it was it was the presence of the addiction. I know you perhaps feel I was going to say it was the presence of God, but it was the presence of the addiction, because the addiction had never been dealt with. The addiction killed the child. Ultimately, that is what happened. And we started talking about the fact that before you do this again, you need to get some real help. Respect crack. Don't be a fool. Respect it. Because you think you're bad, but you're not as bad as crack. God is greater, but you are not. And something has got to be done, and you need to find out how to get the skills. And I stopped being mad at them and started being mad at the drug. And that's what began our work in working people through recovery. I think you all understand what I'm saying. It's understanding that something wicked has visited us, and we've got to do some things about it. We buried that baby. The mother and father are clean till yet. They have another couple of kids, and they have a recovery program that they are themselves in charge of. What am I saying to you? All of those are the underlying factors. A lot of our children that are on the spectrum are the children of substance abuse families and abusive families. And I know I'm right about that. I know Dr. Shack knows the statistics much better than I do. But we have got to minister to the whole person. We've got to seek, if we're going to help the children, we have to seek to help their parents. If we're going to put children in foster care, we got to train foster parents better and make sure that they're not in it for the fishes and loaves. Are they in it for the money, or are they in it for the good of the child? And make that decision. And I know I'm saying a little more than I should, but I will say that my epiphany in that moment, this was my epiphany, Dr. Lewis, was when I listened to them weep about the loss of their child in that moment. And I was so upset and so frustrated with them. What I believed had been the Spirit of God in that moment said to me, you cannot have the agony that they do. Now, you may feel bad, but what they are feeling is far more than what it is that you are feeling. What they are experiencing is far greater. They just don't feel that they can be anything but helpless in this moment. Let's find some ways so that they are not ever this kind of helpless again in these moments. And that's still rings very true to me, that experience. I wanted to share it with you.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. Go ahead, Louis.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. You know, that baby could have very well have been me. You know, I ended up in foster care because my mother had a substance abuse problem. She was a heroin addict. And having gone to the store one early Saturday morning, she left me and my sisters in the house alone, as many Black mothers and parents do, right? And the kitchen caught on fire. And I got caught in the kitchen when it was on fire. And the result is, after they pulled me out of the fire, they took me away and placed me in foster care. And I remember distinctly the morning that the woman came and got me. And she was a white woman who had button-up shoes. And I remember that I mentioned the button-up shoes because the thinking, button-up shoes were definitely an 19th century phenomenon. And the thinking of foster care system is very 19th century phenomenon. The first thing that she did was she told me if I didn't stop crying, she was going to take me to the police station. I'm 3 years old. And I recall that it's the first time that the police were used to get me in order as a 3-year-old, because she wanted to present to the foster care system a very quiet and compliant young man. Bishop, you talked about non-judgment. Another thing that really needs to happen in the foster care system is that the foster care parents need to be evaluated much better, and to make sure that part of that evaluation is to check on their judgments. A lot of the hatred, to your question, Bishop-elect Vanessa, she hated me because she felt I was gay and told me that she would prefer that I die. And the foster care system failed me, like with this young woman, because between the age of 3 and 10, I had more than 15 different social workers, most of whom I never saw. Their names are just on my record. And the sister who came to me when I said I wanted to leave that home was a young African-American woman, big 1971 natural, who said to me, "You can't be a fag. You can't be a fag. She only wants you." She was making excuses for the abuse that I was experiencing by telling me that only white people are fags, and I couldn't be a fag. So basically, I needed to man up to the abuse that was happening to me in the home. And it was because I had the wherewithal to insist that I wanted to leave that I finally found another place. So there's a lot to do with judgments and predisposed, beliefs of foster care folks. But most of the thing is that if they don't have compassion, they can't be doing this. You know, in the 18th and 19th centuries, we took people who were mentally ill and locked them up and walked away. What we're doing to kids in foster care today is the same thing. We're throwing them away. We're locking them in someone's home and walking away. And so when we have the situations like this young woman who was killed, you talk about the responsibility, Dr. Shock. All the responsibility was all along that way. And the people in the foster care system, the first thing they wanted to do was to cover their behinds, to make sure that, it's the police, it's not us. But there were real problems in those homes before anything else happened. And we have to realize that that's the way the foster care system operates.
Yeah. I was just going to say, that's what I mentioned earlier. Like, we really need to deal with society's prejudice against children, right? So while racism and sexism deals with, certain types of prejudices in this society, we suffer from childism, right? Which is prejudice against children. And in being childish, right, or exercising childism when it comes to children, we mistreat children in order to fulfill certain needs through them, right? So we do this in the larger society, and we also do this within the church. But when that happens, there's a broad continuum of acts that happened against the child that is not in the best interest of the child, right? And one of the first things we can do, right, to combat childism is to start listening to kids, right? When they say, I'm hurt, don't say, oh, you ain't hurt. Oh, you ain't feel nothing. No, I really felt something that hurt. I slammed my finger in the door. It hurt. And don't act like you forgot what it felt like to slam your finger in the door, right? Because it hurt. So we have to start listening to what kids are telling us, right? If Micaiah called the cops and said, somebody's trying to stab me, they're trying to kill us over here, right? And when the cop arrived, he didn't say, well, what's going on? First of all, he had his gun drawn. We talk about de-escalation and all that other stuff, but he had his gun drawn and said, well, what's going on? You had your gun drawn already before you even asked the question. But she said, help me, right? Somebody's trying to hurt me. In one of the articles, it said there was a previous instance where the foster mother tried to fight her, right? That's not the first time that something like this has happened to her. And I'm sure she didn't have mutism about it, right? She spoke up about it. So we have to listen to what our kids are telling us. So it has been proven that young people thrive when they have a loving adult who cares about their protection, who wants to keep them safe, secure, and then the relationship, that positive relationship that we develop with them is one that is sustained. So the kids know that I can always go to Bishop if something happens, if something's going on. I can always go to Dr. Lewis and let Dr. Lewis know what's going on. And Dr. Lewis will listen to me and will respond to the need that I'm presenting, right? Otherwise, a kid is always going to be on alert, right? Always going to be ready to what? Fight, flight, or freeze, right? Ready to react, right? And so even in Micaiah's case, everybody thought, well, she had a knife. She was fighting for her life, right? And then the other thing we have to be mindful of is how trauma impacts the brain, right? It changes how our brain develops, particularly for young people and during adolescence, where that's where the time where your brain is really being developed, right? During adolescence. And so if I'm organized by trauma, right, my brain is reacting differently, right? I'm always in survival mode, right? And I'm always on alert, and I'm always, trying to look around and see what's going on, right? And so we have to talk about trauma as well, but definitely it starts with just listen, right? Listen to what the young person is telling you. I'm hurt. This person said X, Y, Z, right? And stop trying to ignore or excuse or make excuses for what they're telling you.
Excellent, Dr. Shack. Thank you so much. I hope this is good information, people. I hope you're receiving it. Again, thank you to the Facebook Live audience, to Twitter, and to YouTube. I have 2 questions here. Let's see if I can get to them. They're going to be the last 2. One is from Marlene C. McLaurin. She says, how about building in an aging out curriculum by age 15, perhaps via community colleges, with interest earning bonds, annuities, etc., so that 18-year-old age out with skills and knowledge required for self-sufficiency? Yes.
Let me say something about this, because the absence of the plan is what is evident in terms of everything that we've talked about. And just like my grandsons, that we have a Gerber thing that started when we first saw their little cute selves, okay? And started sending a little something every month. When they turned 16 or 18, I think it's 16. But anyway, they get $20,000 or $30,000. And of course, our intention is that it's put toward furthering their education. That'll be a nice chunk out of the rest of what we have to do. You understand what I'm saying? To help them to move forward. But it also suggests to them that we have their future in mind, that we are concerned about them being their best and highest selves. I think it's an attitude. When children are put in foster care, there needs to be a plan, a clear, cogent plan about what's going to happen, for both when they are abused or misused, but also what happens with their lives. Who's going to help them to create dreams and plans to be and to do? So that's going to take some kind of mentoring, something alongside of. And I think that's a good place for a whole lot of grown people to be. I think it's something that should be attached to the whole system that's different from the foster parents. But somebody who has accomplished certain things, and that doesn't always have to be degrees. Some entrepreneurs need to be in that. Some musicians, how am I doing with that? So, some people who are designers in some way, just to give them some strength where we can become community, and they're not just commodities. Where we can become community for those kids, and where Dr. Shack can have something that foster children can come to along with their mentors, right? And connect in very real ways. So I think that is my hope, that we will, as a community, start to throw ourselves around these young people so that they will sense that they have family and extended family and extended family and extended family. That's Lewis's testimony. Somebody with good sense came along, or he would have a completely different story. Extended family, whoever it is outside of that immediate circle that can help them. And my mama said it like this, and I'm done. She said, you need somebody else you can talk to. And I knew exactly when I had my children, there was somebody else always who was not trying to undermine my parents that we could talk to. If you're a grown person that's listening to us tonight, you probably owe more than what you can ever explain to the somebody that you were able to talk to besides your parents. Whatever you call them, big daddy, big mama, other mama, Bama, whatever you called them, they were the ones who you could tell the rest of the story so that you will not feel unheard and unloved. I encourage everyone who's hearing us tonight, be somebody's other mama, somebody's other daddy, somebody's friend, somebody's confidant, and let's help as a community our young people. God bless you.
Excellent, Bishop. Dr. Shack or Dr. Lewis, you have anything that you want to say about that?
Yes, I just want to extrapolate on what Bishop Flunder said. It is absolutely critical that we have mentors and that mentors come along. And one of the best places to find those are folks who have gone through the foster care system and who survived the foster care system, are natural mentors for folks who are undergoing the foster care system. And I also think that it also will help bring some confidence to the folks who are in the system. What we need, I was listening to Bishop Flunder, I was thinking what we need are dream catchers, people who will help you catch your dream and hold your dream. And oftentimes, if the foster home is the place where the hatred is, that's not where you're going to find those dream catchers. But the system could create a plane of folks and programs that will catch those dreams and hold them. And it begins by having folks to come and to pay it forward. I was very fortunate to be able to raise a child. And it was because of my personal experience in the foster care system that made me say, absolutely, we will open the doors to help this young person. And I think we need to have more people like that who are willing to go beyond each one, reach one. And so I would say to those folks who are listening to us tonight, if you've always wanted to be a parent, if you want to see that the next generation has the things that didn't happen for you, it's a wonderful way to pay it forward, is to be a foster care parent and to help someone else. Each one, reach one. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to add to that just to say that there might be people listening who are parenting their children, but they are struggling parenting their children. And I want to encourage them to seek help, right? So two things. One, systemically, we definitely need programs, right, that are out there to support families, right, to support the stabilization of families, right, which are limited, right, and because they're limited, young people who are not necessarily in abusive homes, right, are in homes where the parents are struggling a little bit, trying to figure out what's going on, they end up in the social and foster care systems, right, because parents don't have the tools or the resources, right, that they need, right, and so we do need more programs, right, for family stabilization. But I want to encourage those who are parenting their children now who are struggling to reach out, right, to someone to seek help, right, and the prayer is that if the person that you reach out to don't have all the answers, they would help and reach out to somebody else, and they'll reach out to somebody else so that you can get the support that you need, right? Because sometimes it's not about your not having a desire, right, to love, to protect, to care for your child. It's about not having the tools or the resources or the know-how to be able to do that. Because maybe you weren't parented in the right way and you're just trying to figure this thing out yourself, right? And so I would encourage you to seek out some resources that can help you to figure that thing out, so that the trauma that you may have experienced doesn't get passed down to your child, right? So I definitely want to encourage that. And I think the stabilization of family systems will also help. And I'm talking about the wide-ranging family systems, right? So not just mother-father, but mother-father, grandma, right? That kind of thing can also help, because kids do better if they're placed in families, right? And so, but the grandma may need some support too, right? And that's part of like my testimony. I was raised by my biological grandmother, right? Because my mother was on drugs, right? And so my grandmother could have been like Micaiah's grandmother, who tried it, didn't have the resources, and said, "Listen, you got to take these kids back because I don't know what to do right at this point, right?" But because there was a village of people, right, the somebodies, plural, that helped me, right, gave her some of the tools, right, that she needed, right? And so I think that having those support systems would be beneficial, right? And then also help so that more children are not entering into the system, right, in the same way.
Wonderful, Dr. Shack. I think I want to try this last question. I think we probably answered a little bit of it, but Kimmy Floyd Rice says, so how do we build systems and networks to connect the kids that age out with families who have space and would love to open spaces left by adult children to another young adult? Or how do we create to heal instead of creating to break apart families?
I think if you read the last comment.
Yeah, I will read it. Absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to read that first. And so it says, Kimmy, and hopefully this answers your question. Folks are making plans to work on developing a curriculum for group homes, foster care, and shelters in the audience chat. And that's how we're going to do it.
While we talk. They're working on it while we're talking.
It's going to take community to do it.
I love all of you for this. All of you that are doing something and hooking up with people right now.
Yes.
To make yourself and your assets and the things that you have available. It's going to take a community.
Yep.
But we are enough. We can do this. And our children, particularly now, they really need us. So thank you, everybody who is working on something. What a beautiful question and what a wonderful response.
Thank you for this great conversation on tonight. And we speak the name of Makia Bryant and for all of the other young people, other young girls who have died. And we pray that we will do the right thing. Like Bishop Flunder said, take care of ourselves with mental health therapy and take care of our children, that we would love our children, that we would support our children, that we would listen, like Dr. Shack said, to our children. When they are telling you that there is trouble, please believe that there is trouble. Please don't be dismissive of children. And let's support people who have children. You know people that have children, give them a call. See if they're okay. Ask them, do they need anything? Is there anything that you can do? Is there anything that they need provision for? We all know that we're in the midst of 2 pandemics and that there are a lot of things that are going on within our economic system. And wherever we can be of service, please do that. You know of food pantries, give somebody a list of the food pantries they can go to. In California, I know you can go to City of Refuge. You know, there are places that you can go. I know you can go to so many churches all around the world, right? There are things that we can do. There are ways that we can be of service. Like, let's not just be talking heads, right? Let us be people who are about action and doing something to change the tide that has befell us. I love you all tonight. I want you to have a great night. I appreciate you, Dr. Lewis. I appreciate you, Dr. Shack. I appreciate you, Bishop Flunder. And I appreciate you, Facebook Live and YouTube and Twitter, for being with us on tonight. We have a few announcements for you on tonight. We're going to ask Bishop Flunder to make the first with regards to giving, and then it will come back to me. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone, for your presence, for your voices, for your energy, for your concern in our community. And I want to encourage you to help us to continue to keep this broadcast coming. You know, we're not afraid to pick up whatever it is that is the cause today in this moment as it relates to our community and our world. Please support our broadcast by sending a donation via Cash App to $TFAM Annual. That's $TFAMANNUAL, or by PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAMJustice. Support us. Help us to continue to do what it is that we are doing. Our intention is to make a change happen. We will emerge. We will emerge very different from the way we came into this pandemic and this time, and we'll do so together. Come on, join us, and let's work together to bring substantive change. God bless you is our prayer. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder. And by way of announcement, we want you all to make sure that you check out the Healing Place Apothecary. It is the business of Nubian Flunder. She is the daughter of our presiding bishop, and we are grateful tonight. She has a business and has so for several years now. Please go to www.THP, which stands for the Healing Place, apothecary.com. That's THPapothecary.com. And if you so desire, we want you to go to www.skymichelle.com for Sky Michelle's teas and things. Sky Michelle is the kid boss. You can follow her on Facebook and on Instagram at I Am Sky Michelle. There are several collections: Dope Black Collection, Faith Collection, YA Flunder Collection, Kara Motivation, Juneteenth, so many things. And we do customization items as well. Thank you so much for your support. And then you can go to Kara Solutions. Focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. Administrative, business, and consulting services for dreamers, visionaries, entrepreneurs, faith, and community-based organizations. You can go to www.kara-solutions.com. And this is the business of Pastor Sue Webley. She is our tech person for Beyond the Gatekeepers. If you want to advertise with us, please go to our Gmail. You can Gmail us at beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. That's beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us. As Bishop Flunder said, please support our broadcast. She already told you about our Cash App and our PayPal. Tonight, our intro and outro is Brown Skin Girl instrumental by S. Bling. Remember, Black Girls Matter. Thank you and have a great night.